Right, before we continue with the second part of the question, I want to once again thank our sponsors Liberty and remind you guys, please remember to download the Tenfold Education app. I know you guys probably have already done that, but just in case you've forgotten, remember that Tenfold Education app is going to assist you with your revision. Right, so let's now continue with the second part of the question where they want me to calculate the value of new equipment purchased during 2020. Now, before we do the actual calculation, let's go through the information first so that we are familiar with what was sold and what was purchased during the financial year. Okay, so from the information given to me, I can clearly see I'm given tangible assets, book value or carrying value at the beginning of the financial year, okay, as well as at the end of the financial year. So remember, brought down beginning of the financial year, carried down end of the financial year. Right, then I've got additional information that is given to me and I want to now read through this info. Tangible assets comprise of land and buildings and equipment, so clearly there's no vehicles in this particular business. Additional property costing 93,750 Rand was purchased during the 2020 financial year. Equipment costing 10,700 Rand was sold at carrying value during the year. The accumulated depreciation on equipment sold at the date of sale was 7,000. And then they tell you new equipment was also purchased during the year. Okay, so looking at that information, let's now go to the actual question that reads, calculate the value of new equipment purchased during 2020. Now guys, this question often appears in your exam. You either have to do the calculation on the actual cash flow statement face itself. So in other words, let's just go to the cash flow statement. So you can either show the calculation here under cash flow from investing activities, or in this particular question, they are specifically asking you to show the calculation in the space given, which is obviously what we are now looking at. Right, now you have two options, grade 12. You can either reconstruct the tangible asset note, or you can also draw up the tangible asset note in a T account format. Doesn't really matter because you're going to end up getting the same answer. Okay, I often prefer the T account because it just makes so much more sense and it's easier to work backwards. But remember, if you prefer the note, go for it. Use the note, whatever you prefer. Right, so looking at the T account, tangible assets, carrying value. And I know you're probably thinking, but hang on, Mahesh, there's no such thing as a T account called tangible asset carrying value. Okay, I agree, there isn't. But remember, when you are calculating in accounting, any calculation is acceptable. As long as you are getting the same answer, doesn't really matter. If they specify, do the note, then obviously you've got to do the note. But the moment they tell you calculate and they give you a blank space, they're telling you go ahead, use the format, use the method that you prefer. Okay, so I prefer tangible asset carrying value, right? It is an asset. An asset increases on the debit side. It decreases on the credit side. We obviously learned this in grade 8. Okay. All assets start with an opening balance brought down and they end with a closing balance carried down. So I'm going to start by filling in my balance brought down of tangible assets carrying value at the beginning of the financial year. So let's go to our information, and at the beginning of the year, remember 2019 is the beginning of the financial year, my tangible assets had a carrying value of 275,000. So I'm going to take that through in my calculation. So at the beginning of the year, 275,000. That was the worth of my tangible assets. Right, then carry down represents end of the financial year, and at the end of the financial year, if I go back to my balance sheet, okay, tangible assets has a carrying value of 352,500. So let's fill that in. Okay, so at the end of the year, my assets are worth 352,000. That color is probably a bit too, let's just change the color. Okay, might be too bright, guys. So an amount of 352,500. Okay, right, then what increases tangible assets? Clearly when I buy. And remember, I did buy land and buildings, and I also bought, okay, I bought equipment. Okay, now remember, guys, once again, this is a calculation. So you don't have to worry about putting in proper contra details. This is purely calculation. So let's now go to land and buildings. And for this financial year, we did spend some money on land and buildings, and property costing 93,750 was purchased. So immediately, remember, I'm going to own more assets. Okay, my assets are now going to increase. So on the debit side, land and buildings purchased an amount of 93,750. Now remember, I'm trying to calculate what was the value of the equipment that I purchased. So for now, I'm going to put a question mark because that is what I'm trying to calculate from the information given. Okay, right, back to this account, tangible assets. What makes tangible assets decrease? Now remember, tangible assets lose value when you write off depreciation. Okay. So the depreciation written off for this financial year, if we go back to our income statement, an amount of 31,250. Okay, so on the credit side of my calculation account, 31,250. Remember, depreciation decreases the value of your asset. Right, what else decreases the value of your asset? If you have a disposal. Now remember, a disposal, I'm getting rid of an asset. I no longer own the asset. So clearly, I'm going to have less tangible assets. So if we go back to our information, and let's go back to information number 1. Remember, equipment costing 10,700, so that's my cost, right, was sold at carrying value during the year. The accumulated depreciation on the equipment sold at the date was 7,000, okay, which means at the date of disposal, the cost, or rather the carrying value of this equipment was an amount of 3,700. So all I'm doing is I'm subtracting 10,700 minus 7,000, and this is the carrying value of the asset that is being disposed or that you're getting rid of. So immediately my carrying value of tangible assets is now going to decrease by 3,700. Remember, by the disposal, in other words, the carrying value of the asset that you're getting rid of. Okay, right. So once all of this is in, I can clearly now calculate my equipment that I've purchased. And how do I do that? Okay, by simply adding everything on the credit side minus the amounts on the debit side. Okay, so all we're doing on our calculator, 352,500 plus 3,700 plus 31,250 minus the amounts on the debit side, and that is going to give me the value of equipment that was purchased. Okay, so let's do that quickly on our calculator, and now it's going to be a bit of a mission. Let's just clear that quickly. So we've got 31,250 on the credit side plus 3,700. So I'm adding up my credits plus 352,500. And remember, then I'm going to subtract the amounts that I've got on the debit side. Let's get the calculator out again. Okay, so we are now subtracting an amount of, let's just move that quickly. So we're subtracting 275,000, and then finally minus 93,750, and that gives me an amount of 18,700. So that is the value of new equipment that was purchased, 18,700. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, guys, if you're comfortable, draw up the tangible asset note. But remember, in essence, you're doing the same thing. Okay, so remember, when you're drawing up this particular note, you're going to start off with carrying value at the beginning of the year. Right, and my carrying value at the beginning of the year, 275,000. Okay, what increases carrying value? Addition at cost. So we bought land and buildings for 93,750. We also bought equipment, and that's what we're trying to calculate. So we don't know what that amount is, right? So that's where my question mark comes into place. Then remember, depreciation. We obviously going to subtract the depreciation written off, which was an amount of 31,250. Okay, we also going to tangible assets decreases by disposal at carrying value, which was the amount of 3,700, and that gives you your carrying value at the end of the year. So carrying value at the end of the year, okay, which is an amount of 352,500. So as you can see, the exact same calculation in the note, okay, has been done in a T account format. Okay,